We're recording.
Greetings, folks. This is Walter and Pat Boyer from Bookends. It is Saturday. We're in the midst of baseball season. We're really excited today. We've got author Erik Sherman talking about his book, Two Sides of Glory. Unfortunately, no Mets players were able to make it today, but we do have Marty Barrett joining us and our regular co-host, Greg Arabatsis. We're quite excited to talk to Erik. Erik's been to Bookends, I think, at least 2 or 3 times with Art Shamsky, with Mookie Wilson.
With Davey Johnson. And then once on my own. Okay.
And obviously, we're still remote, but hopefully, knock on wood, getting back to in live performances, events sometime maybe in the fourth quarter. I'm going to turn it over to Greg. Greg, as a background, is an expert in scaling and growing early stage product companies in the nutritional supplements industry and works with numerous professional athletes and celebrities as brand ambassadors and influencers. And Greg's been with us now, I think, about 5 or 6 times. Thank you, Greg. And thank you, Erik and Marty, joining us to talk about Two Sides of Glory. So, Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Pat and Walter. It's an absolute pleasure. Yes, this is the 5th or 6th time that we've had the opportunity to do this. And just to, again, remind everyone, it's incredibly important that we continue to support small businesses and independent bookstores like the fine bookstore in Ridgewood, New Jersey, Bookends. If you haven't already ordered the book and you'd like to order, once this is recorded, you can go to bookends.com. That's book-ends.com. to order a copy of this wonderful book and many others. And it is my absolute pleasure today to handle the Q&A for this interview. We have with us, again, Erik Sherman. Erik is a baseball historian and a New York Times bestselling author of Kings of Queens, Life Beyond Baseball, and the 86 Mets. He's the co-author of 5 other highly acclaimed baseball-themed books, including After the Miracle, The Lasting Brotherhood of the 69 Mets, and Mookie, Life, Baseball, and the 86 Mets. You can learn more about Erik at erikshermanbaseball.com. And we also have the pleasure of Marty Barrett joining us. Marty is a former American League baseball player. He played for the Boston Red Sox and the San Diego Padres. He was a standout player for the Arizona State University team, and his brother Tommy played for the Philadelphia Phillies. He started in the 1986 postseason, where he set a major league record with 24 hits in 14 postseason games and was named the ALCS Most Valuable Player. In the 86 World Series, Marty had 13 hits in 30 at-bats and posted an on-base percentage of .514 against the Mets. Near the conclusion of Game 6, he had been selected by the NBC television broadcast team as player of the game. He was the final batter in the series against Mets closer Jesse Orosco. So my first question is for you, Erik. Why this book and why now?
Well, I've always been intrigued by the 86 Red Sox. I was in Boston. I was living up there in the mid-'80s. I went to Emerson College. I worked for the CBS affiliate up there, and I got to meet a number of the players and probably watched just about every single game. And I don't think any team in the history of baseball has had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows within a 2-week period that the 86 Red Sox had that October. And I think it was a generational team in that it was the only Boston Red Sox team over a 28-year period to win the American League pennant from '76 up until they won the World Series in 2004. So why now? I think after them having won 4 World Series this millennium, that people are really nostalgic for this team. And when these 86 Red Sox return to Fenway for personal appearances, they're treated like conquering heroes. So when I first came up with this idea, I ran it by some people I really respect. They're like, yeah, I mean, the definitive book on this team has yet to be written. And I was very excited about doing it It was a star-crossed team with a ton of heart. And I wanted to get a sense of how 86 affected the rest of their lives and careers. And the interviews that I did with all of these guys, they had a lot to say. Most of them were highly emotional. These guys really care 35 years later.
Absolutely. One of the most memorable teams of all time for certainly what could have been, and in many circles, what would have been for a number of years following that. You've written 7 books now, Erik. Did the process involving this book differ from the others that you've written?
Well, so I've been the co-author of 5 of those books. So that's when at least what I do is I write the book as if I'm the other person. So as if I'm Mookie Wilson or Davey Johnson or Steve Blass or Glenn Burke or Art Shamsky. So in that respect, it's very different from how I wrote this book, which was in the new journalism way, where I was a part of the story, going out and visiting these players, where they work, where they live, traveling all around the country. So I basically followed the game plan that I used for Kings of Queens, where I did the same thing, traveling 30,000 something miles around the country. So it's just so much better than interviewing these players over the phone, because when you meet them in person, you can sense the emotion, you can look in their eyes, you can read the body language. It's just so much better. And the highest compliment that I get from my readers is that it's like they tell me, it's like I'm having a beer with you and whoever you're interviewing. It's highly personal, and so it's kind of become my niche.
Yeah, and I would agree to that. You could pick up this book or any of your other books in any chapter and be captivated by the story and come back to it later. And the way that you weave a specific tale with regards to these important players that were involved on every level is extremely compelling. So I encourage anyone that is familiar not only with this book, but the previous books that Erik's written, which are, of course, many of which are available through Bookends or through Erik directly. Please do pick those up. So Marty, question for you, and one of the things that I know that our audience would be interested in is, it's been 35 years, what you're up to these days. I have a lot of questions for you, but why don't we start there, what you're involved with doing and what you're up to these days?
Okay, well, when I got out, hi to everyone, by the way. When I got out of baseball, I actually wanted to stay in baseball and manage. And so I got into coaching with the San Diego Padres organization right after I retired as a player, and did that for 4 years, 3 years in Las Vegas, then 1 year in Rancho Cucamonga where I managed. And they wanted me to move up to AA. And it was funny. I had my son, Kyle, who's now 30, he was born in 89. So he's 32. They would come down and see me every Monday, because in the California League, we had Mondays off. And then I would fly up to Las Vegas from Rancho Cucamonga, or drive back, and they would take me back to the airport. So this one time they were taking me to the airport for me to go back down, and my son had these baseball cards of me, and he was looking at them, and he was looking at this one particular baseball card that when you kind of turn it in your hands, it switches to an offensive thing, a defensive thing, more kind of like a holographic type thing or something like that. But anyway, and it had a headshot of me also. So I said, "What do you got there?" He goes, "Oh, I'm looking at my favorite card of you." I go, "Oh, why is that?" I thought he was going to say, "Look, I changed this 3 ways." He goes, "This is the picture I look at when I forget what your face looks like." So it just cut me to the quick. And so at that time, I decided, I told my wife when I got back there that back to Rancho Cucamonga, I called her, I said, "I think this is going to be my last year." It ended up being my last year. And then I ended up coaching Kyle in Little League for the next 6 years in Summerlin, Las Vegas, and we won a couple championships. He was fun, and then after that, he decided to get into football and wrestling, and I was probably the greatest wrestling parent of all time because I knew nothing about wrestling. And all these other parents of kids, all these, I'm sure a lot of the viewers have kids now that, or have nephews or nieces that are in club ball and that type of thing. And they know how competitive it is and how parents get involved. So I just sat back and watched. And while other parents were screaming, I didn't know what to scream. And he did really good. He was a 2-time state champion and ended up going to Stanford, and it worked out really good. But in the meantime, while I was doing that, my wife and I, she loves to design houses. And so we would buy property on usually in a golf course community and design a house, have an architect draw it up for her. And then we would build it and live in it for 2 or 3 years and then sell it and then take those profits and kind of do the same thing. We did that 5 or 6 times. And fortunately for us, one of the last times we did it, the last house we sold was in 2007 before the great recession. And then after that, during the Great Recession, I started buying up little homes in Las Vegas, and they became rentals. So now I manage the rentals. So that's kind of my story for the last 25 years, mixed in with a lot of golf. I mean, I love golf. I have a passion for golf. I mean, a lot of golf trips all over the country, different parts of the world. So that's basically what I've been up to.
Great stuff, and love to hear those stories. I know that from family, whenever they hear about guys post-playing career that they're uber successful, it's just wonderful to hear. So great. So first question with regards to the game is the highs and lows. I mean, the ALCS against the Angels, obviously the highest of highs, and then 7 days later playing the Mets. Walk me through that a little bit, what that was like, and the preparation, or did the Sox feel that the Mets were going to be as tough an opponent as the Angels were, and what was the general sense as far as the Red Sox team was concerned, as far as that was concerned?
I think we definitely thought the Mets were the team to beat. That they would be a tougher foe than the Angels. The Angels were tough also, but the Mets were going to be tougher because they'd won 108 games that year. And obviously we were coming off a fantastic win against the Angels. We were up in that series and then went to Anaheim, and they were beat us pretty good there. And then the next thing you know, Dave Henderson hits that home run in Game 5 when we almost think it's over. And when we win that game, we go back with huge momentum back to Fenway. And really those games were pretty easy. I guess we were riding so high off that we just weren't going to be denied, which gave us a lot of confidence going into the Mets, because we felt like Bruce Hurst and Roger Clemens are going to win their games. So there's the 4 games we need. And obviously we started out great. We won the very first 2 like we thought we would. And then we knew the next 2 were going to be a battle, because I think we had Oil Can Boyd and Al Nipper. We had lost Tom Seaver to an injury that year. I think if we'd had Tom Seaver, it might have even been a different story. We might have won the 3rd game at Fenway, but obviously he wasn't there. So then we lose those 2, but now we're back to our 2 horses. Bruce Hurst at home. We like our chances there. We win that game. Then we go back to New York, and we think we got our ace. We got Roger Clemens, and we should win this game, and we got it. That was kind of the thought that was going on.
Yeah, and if memory serves, didn't Clemens win his first, 14 games that year?
I think he did. I think he was 14-0. Yeah.
Just incredible. Just incredible. So that led into my next question. You were talking a little bit about Tom Seaver. Erik's last book chronicled the 69 Mets, and a little bit on Tom. If you could share some memories of, obviously Tom came over at the trade deadline, but he contributed down the stretch there. And I know that a couple of other teammates of yours had said that he was a big influence on the team. But if you could share some memories of Tom, and also the late Don Baylor, and we'll get into Billy Buckner next, but those 2 guys.
Well, Tom Seaver was the ultimate consummate professional. I mean, what he did, he just carried everything. He had a ton of class and really enjoyed playing with him as a teammate. I enjoyed hitting against him and competing against him because he was such a great competitor. And I remember one time he had a no hitter against us into like the 5th inning, and I actually broke it up with a base hit to left field. And he remembered that. He's so smart and had a great memory. But he just brought, just like Don Baylor, when Don Baylor came over to the Red Sox, he gave us that extra swagger we needed. I mean, I thought it was great for Jim Rice to have another big player and Tony Armas was that way, and Dwight Evans. So we had some big players, but Don Baylor gave us that presence. He had been with the Yankees, and he just had that presence to him and wasn't afraid to get hit. He'd lead the league in hitting, but a very affable, laugh type guy. Everyone thought he was a mean guy. No, he was funny and laughing, and so he brought that, and he was a great addition to our team in the heart of our lineup. I think at one point, I mean, he might have hit 4th every now and then, but Jimmy was hitting 4th probably the whole time. But we had Barrett, Boggs, Barrett, and Buckner. We had the killer bees, and then we skipped a guy, and then Baylor. So we had 4 guys that had the last name that started with B. So that was pretty neat. But another story, what I liked about Tom Seaver is he knew how to relax away from the ballpark too. When we were on the road, he loved crossword puzzles, loved doing the crossword puzzles. And so we'd be down in the hotel cafe having breakfast. And, this one particular time, he's solving his puzzles, and, they're saying stuff and they're saying clues, and we're kind of chiming in a couple times. And so he knows that. So he had a little fun with us. And I blurted out the answer. He goes, 3-letter word for obese. I went, fat. He looked at me and goes, thanks, Marty. I realized that he was just goofing around with me, but he just had that nice little sly humor, that little grin. Total class person.
Absolutely, and he's certainly going to be sorely missed in this, or sorely missed. Erik, next question for you. When writing this book, what surprised you the most?
Wow, a lot surprised me. Especially the willingness of those Red Sox players to give me so much of their time. A number of these interviews, in the one Clemens and Evans went and get, like, they went over a couple of days. But I think what surprised me most was how intelligent Oil Can Boyd is on matters of history, and how Oil Can kind of be 2 people at the same time. And I'm sure Marty might be able to relate to this. He can be like this, this street tough guy, and then he can flip the switch and sound like a college professor. So that really surprised me a great deal, how introspective he is. But like I said, there were so many things that surprised me. Roger Clemens, I interviewed him before an April '86 start. So it was probably 10 days before he struck out the 20 Mariners and became a household name. And I remember interviewing him on the Red Sox bench, which, right before a start, which would never happen today. But remembering how tough a competitor Clemens was, like the Don Drysdale of his time, how friendly a guy he is. I mean, he could not have been more accommodating and nicer. We broke the interview up because he had to go to Scotland on a golf trip. And he texted me as soon as he landed back in the States. And he said, hey, I want to make sure you have everything that you need. So for someone that, was known for, brushing guys back with a 95-mile-an-hour heater, and being so competitive on the field, Just a super nice guy. So those are just a couple of examples, but there's a long, long list of things that surprised me.
You have a great picture I've seen online of Seaver holding court with Clemens, and I could only imagine what that conversation must have been like. I mean, if those two were together when Tom was in his prime, I mean, it would have been lights out. But a great way.
Yeah, I don't think it was any mistake that the Red Sox put Seaver's locker next to Clemens after the trade. And in the Seaver chapter of the book, Bruce Hurst, Joe Sambito, and Roger Clemens go on and on and on about the influence that Seaver had on them as relatively young pitchers.
That's my wife in the background, guys.
Oh.
So Marty, next question for you. I'm a huge fan and advocate for the late great Billy Buckner, and I think that he was really given a bad deal in terms of this whole situation with the '86 series. Obviously, they poked fun at it on the Larry David Curb Your Enthusiasm show. But what a class act he was. What a career Bill Buckner had with the Cubs, the Dodgers. And if you look at his overall numbers, I mean, you're talking about a guy that could be borderline Hall of Fame. So if you could share some memories of Bill Buckner and any thoughts that you have about that Game 6 and the decision for him to stay in there that John McNamara made.
Well, Billy Buck was one of my favorite teammates. I mean, he was such a gamer. I mean, he would be done with a game. He'd be iced up on his ankles, on his shoulder, everywhere. And great hitter, great contact hitter, didn't strike out much. He was a very, very good friend of mine. I mean, myself, Billy, and Dwight Evans would eat with each other, or have lunch with each other literally every day on the road. Back then we were doing this thing called Eat to Win. So it was a lot of chicken and pasta. So we would always order that. We knew all the great chicken and pasta places all over the country. And he's another guy that just, our team was so great then. I personally think he should be a Hall of Famer. I think he did enough to be in the Hall of Fame. If he'd have got 120 more hits, it would have been a sure thing, or whatever. He was short of 3,000 hits, but just the longevity of it all. And he won a batting title. We stayed in touch after his playing days. I actually spoke at his memorial after he passed away. That was tough, very tough there. Bruce Hurst was there, Walt Riniak, Tommy Lasorda, Tom Paciorek. It was really nice. It was a nice send away for him. And they had these posters of Bill in those old time Chicago Cub, but kind of like powder blue with dark blue pinstripes back from the Cubs day, and seeing great guys like Pete Rose. And he played against some of the greatest guys that I grew up loving. And so it was just great. I mean, he loved playing golf too. We'd play golf. Bruce Hurst would have a tournament down in St. George, and we'd all meet up there and play golf and talk anything from business to politics. It was just a lot of fun. And as far as the '86 season, he really carried us in that last month. Toronto was right on our tails, and Bill Buckner had an amazing Player of the Month type month. Maybe he got Player of the Month. I think he hit like 8 or 9 home runs, a bunch of RBIs, and I just remember him in Baltimore just really getting hot. And we just really, really needed him, and he came through. And then he was a little snake bit in the World Series. He hit so many balls good, but they were just right at everyone. And then obviously that play in '86, those type of plays, they happen all the time during the year. Little balls like that, it happens. And there's comebacks like that. You're 2 outs ahead in the regular season, and you're up by 3 or 2, and teams come back. It's one of those things. It just gets really exaggerated when it's such a big big scene. But and Schiraldi did a good job. I mean, Carter got a little bloop hit into left, and then Kevin Mitchell got a bloop hit, and Ray Knight got a bloop hit. It was just like, but that happens during the year, and then obviously the ground ball to Billy. I always say that they'd already tied the game up. If Billy catches that ball and flips it to Stanley and he's out, okay, we go to extra innings. And typically when a team comes back from that type of deficit and almost like really losing the World Series, they come back and now they're back in it. I'm not so sure that they probably would have won the game anyway by the time, in extra innings, because it was going to more extra innings. So, felt bad for Billy, felt really bad for him, really, really bad. Felt bad for Bobby. It was a tough situation. And I remember Bruce Hurst breaking the ice a little bit. He said he thought Gene Mock, who was the manager of the Angels, he goes, he's probably doing backflips right now, because we had just beat them in the same type of manner that they had it, same situation. And like I said, it happens during the regular season. It had just happened to us on the good side of it a week earlier.
So congratulations on being named into the Red Sox Hall of Fame. And along with that, another question is in terms of interactions with Red Sox immortals like Johnny Pesky, and any stories that you could share with about him or about the great Ted Williams.
So I love Johnny Pesky. I loved him. He was great, and he could handle a fungo as good as anyone I've ever seen. He would hit ground balls to me. I had a lot of fun with him. I would catch balls behind my back. I'd actually have my glove and put it behind my back between my legs and catch ground balls. And every time I did it, he'd flip the fungo up in the air. Just a really great guy. And you talk about a guy that just lived baseball his whole career and his whole life. He was just fantastic and always had some really good thoughts, about getting out of slumps and those type of things. And, I think his nickname might have been Mr. Red Sox, and I think it was well deserved. Ted Williams, funny story about him. When I first got signed by the Red Sox, I went right from Arizona State to Winter Haven, Florida, and did pretty good. I think I hit 300 there, and we won this championship. And so the next year is my first year in spring training, and so we all were hitting, and they had the cameras on us this one particular day. And then 3 days later, they brought us all in a room and said Ted Williams is here to talk about hitting. And he started reviewing. They were showing this on a monitor. I don't know if it was on one of those bigger monitors, but they were showing the pictures or the video of what they had just done 3 days earlier. And he would comment on it. And then I came up and was swinging. He goes, "Now look at that. That's a nice little style that guy has. Who is that guy?" And they said, "It's Marty Barrett." And he goes, "That's a nice style. He's got a good look to him." And, I took that. I called my dad up that night. I said, "You're not going to believe this. Ted Williams said had a nice style and a good look." I mean, those type of words from those type of guys mean such a difference. There's so much mental part of baseball and sports. And when when you get those type of feedback, it just really helps you as a person mentally. And then I would always play as I got to the big leagues. His son always came to spring training too, and I would play chess with his son in the morning, for about an hour before we started our meetings for spring training every morning. So I had a lot of good times with John Henry also.
That's great stories. Thank you. I'm going to turn the next question over to my college age son, who I think it's important that we turn over the legacy to the next generation to keep the sport of interest. So I'm going to let my son ask the next question, my son, Austin.
Hi, Marty.
Hi, Austin.
So I was wondering if you could tell us about playing in the longest game ever.
Oh, yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was my first year in AAA, and a lot of big names in that. I mean, especially from their side also. But Cal Ripken was in that game. Mike Boddicker was in that game. Bruce Hurst was in that game. Wade Boggs. So anyway, it started out. It was a really cold, windy day, wind blowing straight in. One of those days where you know it's going to be a 2-hour game because there's not going to be a lot of offense, and we'll be in and out of there. And we wanted it that way because it was cold. It was really cold. So I think it's like 1-0 or 1-1 or 2-1, and I think it's the 9th inning, and it looks like the game's going to be over, and then somebody gets on and gets a hit, and Wade Boggs doubles them in, and now we're tied up, and we're like going to extra innings, and we're like, oh, okay, well, and it's freezing. We literally got those trash cans made out of metal, and we're burning stuff in there, or broken bats and stuff like that, trying to keep our hands warm constantly, and the innings are going quick. I mean, I think Jim Umbarger threw like 9 innings of no hit ball from like the 12th inning to the 21st inning or whatever, and finally in like the 21st or 22nd inning they score, and at that time we're like, okay, it's over. I'm so glad somebody scored. You want to win, but you also want to get out of there, and dang if somebody doesn't get on, and Wade Boggs knocks them in again. We're like, oh, Boggsy, so it just keeps going, and then we're getting a little punch drunk. You get a little hop to your step all of a sudden, and then you get down a little bit, and Joe Morgan had been kicked out of the game at some point, and the umpires are wondering if they call it at 1 a.m, and they can't get a hold of the league president in Columbus. He was at a party in Columbus, and I want to say finally, as it gets to the 32nd inning, at like 3 or 4 in the morning, they finally call the game and said, okay, it's suspended. And I remember telling my dad the next morning. He wondered why he hadn't heard from me, and I said, oh, because I'd call my dad every night after each game and tell him how I did. And I said, well, I got good news and bad news. The good news is I got 2 hits. The bad news is it took me 12 times to get 2 hits. And one funny one, I'm sure you guys have all heard of it, maybe some of your viewers haven't, was the funny story about Louis Aponte from Venezuela. He went home that night, and his wife was mad at him, locked him out because she thought that he was at the bar drinking all night and was getting in late. And he was telling her that no, it was the game, and she didn't believe him. And then finally she realized that it was the truth. And then we continued the next day. We played them again on a Sunday, but not that game. And we literally were dragging ourselves through that game. And then we continued the game on June 23rd during the players' strike, which is an interesting day for me because I was born on June 23rd, and I was turning 23 that particular day. And later on in the game, Dave Koza, who was number 23, knocked me in with the winning run. So I thought that was always kind of coincidental.
Absolutely. So that begs the question, with some of the changes that they've made recently over the past couple seasons with COVID, trying to make the games faster, more fan-friendly, timing the pitchers, how many pitches in between at bats. Any thoughts, Marty, about this change in extra innings of having the runner on second base to start the extra inning games?
I don't have a problem with it. I'm fine if they didn't do it. I'm fine if they do it. Either way, I know, like I think I mentioned, I coached some club ball during the last, maybe I didn't mention that, but during like 7-8 years ago, I coached club ball. Like almost every major leaguer there today has played on club teams because that's just the way it is now. Little League is still goes, but the really good kids, they don't play much Little League anymore unless there's like an all-star team that wants to win the Little League World Series. But most of them play club ball, and that's how we ended ties. You start with a guy on second base. So they have to do one or two things. Either do that, or they have to add like 4 more pitchers and tell them it's going to be pitchers. It has to be a roster of 30 people, and the extra 4 got to be pitchers to allow pitchers to continue to pitch during those long extra inning games. But if they don't want to do that, which the owners probably don't want to do because then they have to pay 4 more people, then the logical solution for everyone is to try to get the game over quicker. And I really believe that most times, more times than not, whatever your winning percentage is for that year, if you have a 560 winning percentage, I would think that you would probably have a 560 winning percentage in those extra inning games too. And if you have a losing percentage, you probably have the losing percentage. So I still think it's going to come out the same.
Even out. Yep.
I really do. So it helps. Nobody gets hurt. You don't have an infielder pitching all of a sudden in the 18th inning because they've run out of pitchers. So, as much as I am a baseball purist, I have no problem with it.
Great. Erik, was there a lesson that you learned in writing this book and interviewing these 86 Red Sox players?
A lesson that I learned, I think it's just a general lesson that I've learned when I write any of these books. It's just to ask very open-ended questions and to be a good listener. A lot of times what writers or reporters will try to do is they'll almost try to dominate an interview. My style has always been to let the subject talk, and you'll find out much, much more that way. It's to know your stuff, which I like to think that I do. That I'm a baseball historian, but I also go into any interview very, very well prepared. So it's those types of things, and also to show that you really care, which I really do. In the case of the 86 Red Sox, I have tremendous respect for all 24 members of that team that went to the World Series, and just a lot of respect for the game and the institution and what those guys lived through, which I'm still fascinated by. So it's those types of things, I think.
Was there anything that surprised you when you were going through this whole process and interviewing the various players?
Well, aside from what I mentioned earlier about Clemens and Oil Can Boyd, I think certain mysteries are solved. Yeah, unsolved mysteries are resolved. Like one of the things that Marty told me, I think is fascinating, and especially since you were just talking about Bill Buckner before, someone that had 2,715 lifetime career hits, a Gold Glove, better fielding percentage at first base than Lou Gehrig, but yet the average fan remembers the play, the Buckner play. Well, not only was he terribly hobbled, but Marty revealed to me in the book that there was a pickoff play on at second base involving Ray Knight. So Ray Knight is way off of second base. I think he's still celebrating the wild pitch that had just preceded him getting to second base. And Ray Knight is not a speedster or a base stealer, and he was about 30 feet off of second base. So Marty, very astutely, makes Gedman aware of this. So a pickoff play is on that either isn't picked up by Stanley or maybe they decide not to do it. But anyway, Marty, for the pickoff play, he has to shift himself more toward second base. And as a result, Billy Buck has to shift himself further away from first base. Now he's already hobbling. So Mookie, something he never does, he got around on a sinker and hits it very close to the first baseline. So now Buckner has to move back to his left much more so than he would normally had. None of this gets talked about. And so it's these nuggets that you find out about when you talk to someone like Marty, who, by the way, Billy Buckner told me was his favorite teammate of all time over a 22-year career and one of the smartest. These are the types of nuggets that you get and the type of things that you look for to differentiate your book from either other books or other columns or articles that have been written about that season and that game.
And we'll leave it there. One other key point, which I never knew, but I learned from reading excerpts of the book. I'll burn through this in a couple days. I'm sure it's a great book. Is what a class team the Red Sox were. A number of players actually went over to the Mets clubhouse to congratulate them. So that's speaks to what a true class team the Red Sox team was under those circumstances. And people don't realize that Boggs, crying in the Red Sox dugout, he had lost his mom recently during that series. So there's a lot of emotion behind this. And this is a very compelling story of a team that could have been a dynasty. And many of the players that were on that team to this very day, still, it pains them, the loss of that World Series, but things could have gone very, very differently. You've got amazing players that had played for that team. Dave Henderson, Baylor, Buckner. I can go on for another 2 hours. This has been wonderful. But we're running out of time. But thank you, Erik, for writing this book. Thank you, Marty, for joining us. Great insights on a number of fronts. And again, the name of the book is Two Sides of Glory. Please support your independent bookstores and your independent booksellers and small businesses that have been hit hard during this pandemic. And I'm going to turn it back over now to Pat and Walter for us to wrap up. But thanks, everyone. I think this has been phenomenal, and I learned a lot, and I hope our audience did as well.
Greg, thank you again for moderating, and Erik, please keep writing books. And Marty, thanks for your insight. I think what's really clear is this is a book for any baseball fan, regardless of what team you follow. And with Father's Day coming up, would certainly make a great gift. So thanks a lot to all of you guys for everything that you did and shared your insights. And for all the fans out there, thank you for your support, and have a great weekend. Take care, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.